This is Faith at Faith and Books. How are you doing? I am making this on New Year's Eve. I think it's about maybe 8 at night, maybe a little later. And I just thought I would do a December wrap-up. I know people are doing all kinds of ranking all their reads in 2024 or their 10 favorites or whatever. I don't have my act together enough for that. But this year, I read more than I've ever read. I read, I think, 84 books. That's amazing to me. I used to barely get to 52. When I used to, before BookTube, I was in this group that was 52 books in 52 weeks. And I often couldn't get to 52. I would get to 50 or 49 or something. So that I read 84 books is amazing. But I'm not going to go retrospective on that right now. I'm just going to wrap up December. Now, I forget the last video I made. Did you notice I got my hair cut? I think my hair looks a little better. I'm feeling better. I had kidney stone before, and I was really in a lot of pain, and I think in kind of a weak state when I made that last video, and hopefully I'll be able to pronounce things better this time. I'm a little embarrassed. But anyway, I don't care about that. I'm just going to talk about the books that I finished in December, that I just finished, and also a little bit about my current reading. And my youngest son, just got engaged this evening, so that was exciting news. Anyway, okay, let me get started. So I cannot remember if I talked about Marion Fay by Anthony Trollope. I really enjoyed this book. It was quintessential Trollope. I love the way he looked at class. That's what it's about. It's about a brother and sister who are both lords or duchesses or whatever. Now it's fading. I finished this a couple weeks ago. But they don't really care about class. They kind of feel trapped by their class, and they don't, philosophically, they don't really agree with it. But it's very hard to get out of a class system like that. And so I love the character of Lord Hampstead and his sister Fanny. Lord Hampstead, though, is much more clearly drawn as a character. And I like the way Trollope is ambiguous, because you're addressing all these issues about rank and class, but then the way it plays out, you don't quite know what Trollope's position is on it, because the way things wind up, it still remains pretty conventional. So I don't want to give any spoilers away, but it was a really enjoyable book. There was a couple, a kind of a side couple, Lord Hampstead's cousin, who marries a kind of a Palliser, Plantagenet Palliser type character. And she's kind of, I don't know, that couple reminded me of the Pallisers. I can't remember the name of Plantagenet Palliser's wife. She's like a major character, and her name has flown out of my head. But anyway, yeah. So I really enjoyed this. Very, very enjoyable read. And it's making me look forward to reading more Trollope. Then I finished Nickelby by Charles Dickens, of course. This is my 7th Dickens now. I've read David Copperfield and Tale of Two Cities and Great Expectations, of course, Christmas Carol. And maybe this is my 8th if I include the Christmas Carol. I also read Cricket on the Hearth, so if I include that novella as well, maybe it's my 9th, because then I've also read Bleak House, and this is since getting on BookTube. I read Bleak House and The Pickwick Papers and Little Dorrit last year, and then this year I did Nickelby. And it was rollicking good fun. In fact, my husband and I are watching the 1983 Royal Shakespeare production of it, which I remember from my childhood. I don't know if I watched the whole thing, but I watched some of it. And it has all these actors that went on to, like the guy who plays Hagrid, or the guy who played what's his name, Charlotte Lucas's father, in the 1995 edition of Pride and Prejudice. He's in it. Just a lot of really familiar actors were in this Nickelby production, and it's rollicking good fun. I would say it's not my favorite Dickens for 3 reasons. Let me see if I can recall them. I was thinking about this earlier. There are a lot of coincidences in it, and I can take a couple of coincidences, but when it gets laid on as heavy as it is in this book, I do think it kind of weakens the plot. The other thing is that I couldn't stand one character in here, Mrs. Nickelby, Nicholas's mother. I thought she was awful, and she irritated the living daylights out of me, and he gives her lots and lots. I think Dickens thought she was really funny, and I did not. I thought she was awful. And so that irritated me. I'll say that brought it down a peg. And then the other thing is, and this crystallized for me because I was watching Katie at Books and Things rank she was tier ranking all the Dickens novels. And for Nicholas Nickleby, she gave it like, the lowest ranking was Dickens, You've Disappointed Me, or something like that. And she said the love stories in this was really disappointing. And yes, you're building and building towards them, and then they kind of happen off stage. Like it's underwritten so much that it was disappointing. So I agreed with her there. Also, I will say that as much as I like Dickens and want to read all his works, and I mean, he's a master at writing and using these rhetorical tricks to really illuminate and expand on the ideas and the description and the atmosphere. He does, to me, he overplays it. He's kind of showy, and he overplays it a bit. And sometimes I do get exasperated with him because I wish sometimes he would use the 10 words necessary to describe something instead of going into the 100 words that he just likes to flourish with. And I think there would be, I don't know, I think there could be more of a balance. I do feel like he does get exasperatingly wordy at times when I don't think it really adds to the book. Sometimes. I mean, most of the time it does, but there's times when I just get a little tired of it. So I will say that I do have that qualm with Dickens sometimes. Like I never feel it with in David Copperfield, but I have felt it in I don't know, in the other, I think in Bleak House maybe, and maybe a little bit in Little Dorrit from last year. I don't know. So anyway, I did enjoy it though very much, and I'm glad that I've got another Dickens under my belt. It was good fun. It was really good fun. The evil people are so evil, and the good people are really good and great characters. So let's see. So I did that. I read those 2, and then I just finished The Lord by Romana Guardini. I've been reading this book for 7 months now and wrestling with it the whole time. I started out all enthusiastic, and then I started to have trouble with it, and I wrestled with this all year, and I finally finished it up today. So I'm very glad I read it, but I have to say, well, there were 2 things that I had problems with. One is I really didn't like the way he characterized the Jews and their role in the story of Jesus. I think he was too heavy-handed, so that kind of fed into anti-Semitism, and he didn't emphasize other things that could counter that. So, and that really troubled me because he was in Germany during the Nazis, and he didn't get, sent to a concentration camp like Maximilian Kolbe or anything. He did have to stop teaching for a while, and he was kind of, I don't know, like home exile or something, where he was home arrest or something like that. But he lived through it. He was fine. And I just feel like somebody who lived through that and knew what the Nazis did should have been more sensitive about the way he was characterizing the role of the Jews. So that really turned me off. He writes in a very kind of emotional way, and a very heightened, almost poetic, very, very descriptive way. And so many times there would be just a sentence that would just jump out at me, and it would just be like this pearl. And so even though I was struggling with certain things going on, I also appreciated a lot, but it got harder and harder. I also think that he was a man of his time, and I guess existentialism was really at its height, and he portrays Jesus as having this existential angst, and I just didn't buy it. I just didn't buy that that characterization of Jesus. So that also grated on me a bit. So, but I will say that at the very end, after Jesus has died, that part, this last part of the book, I really found inspirational and illuminating. And so I loved that whole last section, and his whole section on Revelation I really enjoyed too. So it did pick up at the very end for me, but I'm glad I read it. It's considered a classic. I would like to read other things by this guy. He's known for his philosophy. I think he really influenced Vatican II. I'd like to see how his thinking influenced. I don't think these are his own reflections on the gospel. So he really goes through the gospels with a fine-tooth comb. And he includes a lot from Paul too, Paul's epistles, and of course Revelation at the end. But he goes through and he's reflecting on everything going on. So these are like, they're his personal reflections. Whereas I think he's maybe better as a philosopher and maybe as a theologian when he's not, where he's dealing with other issues, or he's not, trying to retell the story of Christ, but I don't know. I think he had a lot of influence on liturgy in Vatican II. I'm not sure. Anyway, I would still like to read other things by him just to give them another chance, because this just didn't jive with me the way I thought it would, though I thought it was valuable to read, and I'm glad I read it. So then the other things that I've read, I've managed to read 2 more books for my Read the States. And I still don't know who started this challenge, but I now have read 12 books. And the one I read, my Kindle always does this to me when I'm trying to, okay. This book, can you see that? There's a glare. Here we go. If You Lived Here, You'd Be Home by Now, by Christopher Ingram. This was an interesting book. I would give it maybe 3 stars. I mean, I don't think it was the best book that I ever read this year, but it was an easy to read book. It was about a reporter who lived in the Washington, D.C. area in Baltimore County, which is where one of my sons lives, and where my husband grew up. And he was working as a reporter for the Washington Post, and he hated the commute, and everything's really expensive here. And his wife worked at the Social Security Administration, that's in Baltimore. So they were like both having to commute, and they had twins, and the childcare was expensive, and they had all these student debts, and they were just really struggling. And one day he finds this survey. He's a data reporter for the Washington Post. He finds this survey from the Department of Agriculture, I think, and it's ranking, for some reason, it's ranking the counties. What are the most livable counties in the U.S.? And the very last county, and now I can't remember the name of the county. It was like Red Lake Falls County or something like that. In Minnesota, was the worst county to live in. according to this survey. So he writes an article about it, and he starts getting responses from people who live in that county, and he eventually gets invited to come visit to see what it's really like. Well, he goes there and he falls in love with it. It turns out he is not a city boy; he's a country boy. He doesn't like all the people living so close to him. He likes the wide open spaces. He likes the small town life because he feels a deeper sense of community. And so he talks to Washington. This was before COVID. He talks to Washington Post into letting him work remotely because he can do his work via computer and phone. He researches data, statistics and that sort of thing, surveys, and then writes about them. And so they move out there to Minnesota, and it is cold out there. They're way up in north, right next to like Grand Forks. Is that in North Dakota or South Dakota? Is like an hour from them. So they're way up in the northwest corner of Minnesota. Like they're above some of Canada. It's colder where they are. But anyway, it's an amusing story about how he and his family moved there, why they moved there. And it was fun. It was fun. So that's my Minnesota book. So I've got my Minnesota, right? That's colored in there. And then the other book that I just finished a couple days ago, let me see if I can find it, was a really astonishing book, I thought. And let me see if I can find it. Where is it? There it is. Let me get the cover for you. Come on. Yeah, it was F. Scott Fitzgerald's The Side of Paradise. This was kind of an amazing read. He was 23, I think, when he first published this, maybe 24. And it's the story, it's obviously semi-autobiographical. It's the story of a young boy growing up, kind of wealthy at first, but then later is not wealthy anymore. And just the social climbing, like he has a lot of social ambition, and it's been really pushed on him that social climbing is this good thing and that you want wealth and you want the high life. And he goes to Princeton. So this is my New Jersey book. And if you read summaries of this book, they make it sound like it's almost all about Princeton, but it isn't. That's just a part of the book. Although at the very end, he does wind up back at Princeton. But it was a very interesting look. It's amazing to me that someone so young could so eloquently describe the callowness and the self-absorption of youth. And he does that really well. And the yearnings and the insecurities and the posing, trying to be, trying to try things on, being in love. What's that like? Kind of posing for that. It was very, very amazing to me. Like there's really deep wisdom in this book, and I was amazed that he was so young when he wrote it, and he was obviously writing about himself, and he's very self-critical. It went on too long, I thought. He could have cut out some of it and still made his point. And he really plays with form a lot. There's this one chapter where it's written in a play form. There's lots of poetry included, some awful poetry and some really clever poetry, moving poetry. And he plays with, like, all of a sudden in one part of the book, he suddenly starts using I, like the writer is talking about the characters and he's inserting himself in it. And that doesn't happen anywhere else in the book. It had kind of an episodic feel to it, like a drifty feel to it that I think made it feel longer and kind of disconnected in a way. And I didn't think that was good. But you can definitely see the genius of it. And the thing about this, I want to read all of F. Scott Fitzgerald now, he really has a depth that is quite amazing, I think. And so, yeah, overall, I mean, there were parts of the book that I found tiresome, but I got through them, and overall, I just deeply appreciated this book and admire it, and I really want to read more of Scott Fitzgerald. I've read The Great Gatsby and a couple times, and I've read Bernice Bobs Her Hair, and he wrote a wonderful one called Absolution. They're really good. So I really want to read more F. Scott Fitzgerald. That's what this inspired me. Anyway, I'm calling it New Jersey because a chunk of it does take place at Princeton, and so I did color in my New Jersey. So I'm not going to read any more state books until I finish The Great Bridge, which is my New York book, and that's part of the David McCullough read-along. And the other thing I did in December is I read the 24 chapters of Luke. I did that last Christmas too, or last Advent. And then I summarized, but this year when I read the chapter, I summarized it in my commonplace book. So I'm just giving you a sample. So that was a really neat exercise. I like doing that. And I think I might do that more with other scripture studies. So right now, it's 21 minutes. I'm trying to only make 20-minute long videos. I'm trying not to talk more than that. Anyway, right now I'm doing a buddy read with Sean Standfast, The Flame Trees of Thika. I'm behind, I think. I've only read the first 2 chapters, but oh my gosh, this is a reread. I read it a long time ago when I was like 20. Beautiful writing. I'm so looking forward to sinking into this book. It's just great. And there's 2 other books. It's a trilogy. And I'm also going to start Paradise Lost. And I did start it just a little bit. I just read the first stanza, or the first sentence. But I'm really looking forward to sinking into this as well. And for Epistolary January, I started reading the letters of Abelard and Eloise. I'm just reading the preface, or the introduction, which was written back in the 1700s. And it seems really interesting. Like it's going to be, and they did write the letters after they had their torrid affair and were separated, and one was at a monastery and the other one was at a convent, and that's when they were writing these letters to each other, apparently. So, all right, so that is it for now. I wish you a happy new year. Tomorrow, I think I'm going to have about 50 people at my house. We're having I come from a big family. It's an extended family party. And yeah, I'm kind of ready for it. But you can never be completely ready for having 50 people over at your house. Anyway, all right. I hope you're doing well. Happy reading. I hope you had a good reading year in 2024. And I hope 2025 will be even better. All right. Take care, everyone. Bye-bye.